He's Hollywood's it boy.
The fabulous Christopher Wilde picked up 6 music awards last night.
Let's do this.
She's a small-town girl. Sterling Knight. Brandon Michael Smith. And introducing Danielle Campbell.
I really don't understand why you would pick her.
Starstruck.
Hello, Internet. I'm the Disney Brain, and welcome to the DCOM review. If you've been watching these videos for a while, then you know that so far I've only done reviews on DCOMs I've either liked or loved. This time around, I'll probably be a little more critical. Now, that's not to say that I hate this movie or anything. There is a certain charm to it, but we'll get into all of that. Spoiler alert now, you know the drill. With all that said, let's dive into Starstruck. We start things off with an introduction to Christopher Wilde, portrayed by former Sunny with a Chance cast member Sterling Knight, and, more importantly, an alumni of the Mighty Green Team. He's your prototypical rock star with fame and the cars and the girls obsessing over him. Basically, every teen pop star stereotype you've ever heard of mixed into one. And then we meet our two leading ladies, Sarah Olsen, the oldest sister portrayed by Maggie Castle, who's an obsessed Christopher Wilde fangirl, and Jessica Olsen, portrayed by Danielle Campbell, who is anything but. The Olsen family decides to take a trip to Hollywood to visit their grandmother, which is perfect since if they didn't do that, the plot couldn't happen. Once the sisters are in Cali, Sarah convinces Jessica to go with her to a nightclub that Christopher is rumored to be performing at. She fails to meet Christopher Wilde, but while waiting in the car, Jessica gets bored, so she decides to casually walk through dark, sketchy alleys in a city she doesn't know. Well, that just sounds like a bad idea. But, of course, doing so causes her to literally bump into Christopher Wilde himself. Christopher and his best friend Stubby, portrayed by another resident Sunny with a Chance co-star, and former Green Team captain Brandon Michael Smith, both panic as they rush Jessica into Chris's car and get her medical attention, while also avoiding the paparazzi along the way. She eventually gets a clean bill of health, but Christopher needs to sneak her around in his house so he can meet up with the director of the new film he's trying to be cast in. He also agrees to take Jessica home, with both of them being more than a little unbearable attitude-wise, which we'll get into later. But Christopher stays the night with the paparazzi still hot on his tail. The next day, Jessica and Sarah head to Malibu Beach, with Sarah still desperate to find Christopher Wilde. Jessica finds him first, which leads to a hilariously unearned dating montage set to one of Christopher Wilde's songs, Something About the Sunshine. Alright, let's pump the brakes here for just a second. Weren't these two at each other's necks just the other night? Do you really expect us to believe that Mrs. Confrontational herself over here would just give into this sort of thing that easily? She even calls this the perfect day. Did the filmmakers completely forget about the person she used to be in favor of making a more happy scene to set the music to? I'm not buying it. To be fair, she does quickly return to her usual crabby self when things start to go wrong and her grandmother's car is lost forever to what else? Quicksand. You know, there's always more quicksand in movies than there ever is in real life, and nobody in any movie ever made knows how to drive around it, interestingly enough. Anyways, this leads into what I believe to be the most frustrating and bipolar 10 plus minutes in the entire film. First, they're practically in love. Now, they can't stand each other. Then they sort of make up, now they're fighting again. Then they almost kissed, and oh no, Christopher is a jerk again. Movie, please make up your mind. So then, because Big and Famous over here doesn't want to make her life worse, he pretty much breaks things off with her at the beach, but the paparazzi catch sight of her anyway, and do exactly what Chris said they would do, turn it into something ugly. Now, to this movie's credit, the events that follow are some powerful and well-executed scenes that a movie dealing with the pressure and downfalls of being a celebrity desperately needed. Jessica has to watch Christopher lie about knowing her, something he doesn't want to do but feels that he has to do, and his inner turmoil is pretty evident. But I believe the penultimate portion of this film is the way they captured Jessica's interview with the paparazzi afterwards. Both her pain regarding getting dumped by Christopher and her anger with the news outlets that force him to live life in such an abnormal way are very evident here, and she absolutely nails that speech. We all know of more than a few news outlets that stretch the truth or would do anything for a quick and easy headline, so it was a great moment to see them being confronted like that in such a brutally honest way. Backtracking a bit gives us a scene where his girlfriend, Alexis, portrayed by Chelsea Staub, breaks up with him. The reason I never really mentioned Alexis before now is because she only shows up for all of 2 scenes. There's also a great moment between Christopher and Stubby, where Stubby is telling him that he needs to take more control of his life. So, Christopher decides that it's time to make changes. First, he drops the movie deal that he's been working on this entire film. Then, he fires his parents, who also doubled as his agents. And he eventually shows up at, guess what, a dance. And why would he show up at a dance, you may ask? Because every DCOM has its dance. So, he apologizes to Jessica, but she's only half buying it. But when the paparazzi show up, Christopher tells them the truth about him and Jessica, and that convinces her that he's being forthcoming. He even brings an extra pair of designer sunglasses that Jessica said she wanted. They dance the night away to the stylings of Stubby's rapping, and that concludes the film. And now, the characters. I think Brandon Michael Smith is solid here in limited screen time. I never really liked Sunny with a Chance or So Random all that much, but when I did find enjoyable moments in either shows, he was usually a part of them. Well, either him or Zora. He's a great friend and is exactly the kind of voice Christopher needs during his toughest times. Chelsea Staub, however, is wasted here. She's a great actress, and anyone who's watched Jonas knows that. She could have been so much more than the far too typical blonde girl who's overly obsessed with stardom and fame, and who found a new boy literally seconds after dumping Christopher. What they should have done is cast her as the lead, since we all know she has a lot more acting range than Danielle Campbell, who plays Jessica. Chelsea can be both believably tough and charming at the same time, and I really think this casting choice was a mistake. You could have casted anyone to play the role of Alexis, and it's honestly kind of insulting that they gave Chelsea Staub the short end of the stick here. Jessica's older sister Sarah is a pretty by-the-numbers character. She's obsessed with Christopher Wilde, so obviously she's the one that can't ever meet him until the very end. She's unengaging, kind of stalkerish, not really a great sister by any means, and she's only really there because a story about a famous pop star demands someone in the main cast who is overly captivated by a famous pop star. In all, her performance was pretty forgettable. And now we get to the main duo of Sterling Knight and Danielle Campbell. Let's get this out of the way first. There is not a lot of chemistry there. Everything about their on-again, off-again relationship feels very forced, and Jessica's entire character arc is a mess until the end. The movie can't decide what she feels and when she feels it, and takes you out of a lot of scenes that could have been more engaging without the overuse of tonal shifts. Danielle is not well cast in this because I never once believed that she was the kind of girl that would drop all of her aforementioned notions about overhyped pop stars just because she happened to meet one. It bears repeating that Chelsea Staub would have been great for this role. Maybe not perfect, but a vast improvement. Then you add in the fact that Jessica isn't a pleasant person. She's actually rather unreasonable at times. Sometimes she makes good points, and her attitude is well founded, but other times she's just flat out wrong and can't see it. I like the fact that they were trying to create a character like Jessica, someone who's strong-willed and independent, but they definitely got a few things wrong with the character, and it shows here. But, on a positive note, Christopher Wilde is actually a really good character. Sterling Knight gives a great performance here and really nails the nuances of his character. Some of it is so very subtle that you have to actively look for it, but it's all in the way he expresses himself. There's a few scenes where his responses feel so intentionally constructed as a direct result of having lived a life of fame, and it works so well because you feel like, yes, actually, if you did have all this money and fame and could buy whatever, do whatever, go wherever, you'd talk like this too. All of his paparazzi reaction scenes are good too, since it really captures the heart of his struggles very well, and gives you a legitimate reason to side with him when he wants to break things off with Jessica. You could still make the argument that what he did to her makes him a bit of a jerk, but at least there's a somewhat viable reason for his actions. He's not just another overprivileged pop star. Christopher Wilde is a kid with a life and interests beyond what media outlets report, and Sterling Knight balances all of that well and definitely puts the star in Starstruck. And that's Starstruck. So, what's the verdict? Starstruck is a heavily flawed film for all the reasons I talked about. The casting is questionable, some of the screenplay leaves a lot to be desired, too many plotlines occur by pure chance, and worst of all, the very flippant nature of the tone that is mainly created from Christopher and Jessica's interactions really hurt the film. But there's also stuff in it that works. Stubby is a solid character. Sterling Knight delivers his best acting performance in any show or movie, period. And the way it digs into media coverage in general during the final scenes is all well done. And don't get me wrong, I actually like this movie more than this review so far might imply. But there were so many changes that could have been made to make this one really good, but instead it felt really lacking. Even the songs weren't terribly good. I mean, you could take them or leave them, but for me they weren't that special, except for the theme song itself, which is pretty catchy, but definitely less memorable than other DCOM soundtracks as a whole. Starstruck was definitely a better film the second time around when I rewatched it to make this review, but that doesn't necessarily make it a good one. If you like it, great. Again, I don't hate this movie, and there is stuff in there that actually is very well done, but it's a little few and far in between for me. I wouldn't recommend this movie myself, but I can certainly understand and respect the opinions of those who favor it way more than me. All in all, an average film at best, but the only way to know for sure is to give it a watch and decide for yourself. Thanks for watching. If If you like this video, help me out with the likes, subs, and share it all over social media. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. Next up will be the top 10 best and top 5 worst Liv and Maddie episodes. Also, a few of you have been asking me for an Austin and Ally video, and I've got one in development that I think you'll really like if you're fans of the show. And I've got something very special planned for the month of March. Something very, shall we say, powerful? So, be on the lookout for all of that. Until then...
Starstruck.
What did you think? You could just come here and sing to me and everything would be fine?
Yes. No? No.